Stroll down this walkway, and you are treading upon the history of Montrose, Alabama. But oddly enough, the history of Montrose is far from complete since it is totally vacant of one of its most notable citizens. Near Stedman's Landing was the home of Captain Frank Singleton Stone, born in 1841, the son of Sardine Graham Stone Sr., a pioneer in the Mobile, Alabama steamboat culture. The Stone family history dates back to 1635, whereas his ancestors had fought in every war from King Philip's War to the Civil War. But in 1834, Frank's father had begun his life as a steamboat captain, as he watched his 4 sons follow in his footsteps. Then on September 4, 1862, the famed commerce raider CSS Florida attempted to run the Union blockade at the mouth of Mobile Bay and seek refuge under the mighty guns of Fort Morgan. The ship had been decimated by yellow fever and was seeking supplies and a replacement crew. She ran the gauntlet unarmed and came under fire, whereas Seaman James Duncan was killed when he was decapitated by a cannonball that left 7 more wounded. The ship's captain was promptly told that the Florida was to be quarantined. They were to sail north to the upper reaches of Mobile Bay and anchor at today's Stedman's Landing at the small community of Montrose. Reporting aboard was the new navigator Lieutenant Sardine Graham Stone Jr., brother of Frank. Upon arrival, he participated in the funeral of Lieutenant John Maxwell Stribling, one of his Naval Academy classmates, and formerly of the raider CSS Alabama. Both Stribling and Duncan were carried ashore at Stedman's Landing and buried in the Montrose Cemetery. Ironically, Sardine was well aware of the Montrose Cemetery since his brother Frank had his summer residence in Montrose, known to everybody as Stone's Place. The Stone family was well known in Mobile, especially after the war began. Frank's brother Thomas Davis had fought at Shiloh before enlisting in the Confederate Navy. He would fight again in the Battle of Mobile Bay in 1864 aboard the CSS Morgan. Frank had enlisted in the Confederate Army and was in charge of the steamboats transporting supplies and troops per orders of the High Command, while John Woodson was with a militia force somewhere on the coast. After the war, the steamers became even more valuable as food distribution became paramount. Also, to jump-start the economy, commodities had to be transported to the open markets in Mobile. In August 1874, Frank established his company, the Frank's Independent Line, that monopolized the Big B and Warrior River trade. Soon, Frank turned his attention to agriculture, investing $30,000 to establish a vast orange grove of 3,000 trees. By 1888, he had permanently relocated to Montrose and began expanding his orchards. In addition to the orange grove, he planted a pear orchard with over 1,000 trees and cultivated a thriving vineyard. As for Frank's company, he continued his river routes as long as he could before passing away in Montrose on October 4, 1898. His wife, Mary Elizabeth, escorted his remains to Magnolia by way of the steamer Heroine, where he was interred amongst his family at Magnolia. After Frank's death, Mary Elizabeth lived at Montrose with her son Frank Jr., a practicing attorney in Baldwin County. By 1912, she had sold her Montrose property and moved back to Mobile into a new house. There at number 12 Mornree Street, she would pass away on November 3, 1918, and join Frank in Magnolia Cemetery. One of the riverboat captains that worked for Frank was Captain Van Buren Gunnison, a Confederate veteran of the 21st Alabama Regiment, who had fought alongside Frank's brother, Thomas David. In 1876, after listening to Frank's wonderful stories of Montrose, Gunnison set aside the steamboats and became the proprietor of the Battle House at Point Clear, charging the astronomical price of $2 per night and $12 per week. A fortune in post-war Alabama. It is believed that the Gunnison House was on the Grand Hotel property of today. Lieutenant John Maxwell Stribling, United States Naval Academy, class of 1856, was the son of Rear Admiral Cornelius Kincheloe Stribling, former superintendent of the Naval Academy. Young Stribling had succumbed to yellow fever on August 12, 1862, during the voyage to Mobile. A member of the famed commerce raider CSS Alabama, he had volunteered to assist the CSS Florida's captain in getting his ship safely into Mobile on September 4, 1862. Captain Raphael Semmes, of the Alabama, had approved to his transfer to the Florida, noting the young man's bravery in doing so. He is now buried in the Montrose Cemetery, Montrose, Baldwin County, Alabama, located in the southwest corner of the cemetery. Seaman James Duncan was killed on September 4, 1862 in the running battle with several Union picket boats, as the unarmed CSS Florida attempted to enter the mouth of Mobile Bay. Duncan was killed by a cannonball that also wounded 7 of his comrades as they sailed for the protection from Fort Morgan. In August 1874, a Grange Convention was held in Demopolis, Alabama, with one of the major topics a permanent reduction in rates for the river transportation. But if rates fell too far, many of the smaller steamboat operators would fold. But he also saw an opportunity. The conclusion was that a contract was drawn up between the convention and Captain Frank Singleton Stone. The captain agreed to put a certain of boats on the Warrior and Bigby rivers. He also agreed to carry freight at the rates adopted by the convention, which were set at 33 and 1/3%. The amount was less than at any time since the war. In return, the convention agreed to extend to such boats their patronage. Frank's new company would be called Frank's Independent Line. At one time, Captain Frank Stone had his brother Thomas David as his clerk aboard the D.L. Tally. The clerks had a lot responsibility aboard the steamers and accompanied them on their voyages. It is time, indeed past time, that Captain Frank Singleton Stone be elevated to his rightful place among the notable citizens of Montrose, Alabama. Not only for his advances in horticulture in Montrose, but for his contributions to the closing chapter of a great American saga, the Age of Steamboats. His family's legacy began in 1834, when Frank's father, Sardine Sr., first took the wheel of a shallow draft steamer connecting the cotton fields of the Alabama Territory with the commercial heartbeat of Mobile. In that age, the rivers were more, they were roads, lifelines, and arteries of a new nation surging westward. He and his 4 sons did more than pilot boats through the treacherous waterways. They built the very fabric of a river commerce, braving snags, sandbars, and floods to connect a scattered people from Columbus to Mobile. But Frank, quiet and iron-willed, carried something deeper, the spirit of the rivers, and the responsibility to preserve what his father had started. From 1834 to 1911, the Stone name was etched into the wheelhouses and the hundreds of landings on the South's greatest rivers. The age of steamboats has now passed, its whistles silent, its riverbanks overgrown, but the legacy of the Stone family endures, in the ledgers of commerce, in the tales told along the docks, and in the quiet gravestones of Magnolia Cemetery, where these river captains rest in peace. So, Let the name of Captain Frank Singleton Stone be remembered as the living bridge between an era of paddlewheel glory and the coming age of the railroads. The quiet refuge of Montrose bore his spirit. The rivers remember his name, so shouldn't we?